As I played through OMORI for the first time, I knew I wanted to make this review. I kept on asking myself, how am I going to start this? About halfway through the game, I figured I'd start with, OMORI is a game about friendship. Then I kept on playing and settled on, OMORI is a game about guilt. I then finished the game and said, OMORI is a game about trauma, and guilt, and friendship. Anyone who hasn't played the game might be confused about what I just said, especially if you've watched the trailers. However, anyone who has finished the game knows exactly how I feel at the moment. This game is extremely hard to review without spoiling anything. To anyone who saw the trailer for this game and have even just a tiny interest in it, I beg you to experience this story. Even for those like me who are not a fan of RPGs, trust me, it's worth it just for the story. As I said, however, giving a good review of this game without spoiling anything is like tickling a fly in the armpit with a 30-foot stick. Therefore, I'm going to split this video into 3 parts. A short, spoiler-free section, a section that goes more into detail and has mild spoilers, and finally, an extremely heavy spoiler section where I'll dive into many of the plot points as well as the ending. If you want to go into this game completely blind, which I heavily suggest, I'd recommend you turn off this video now, as even the spoiler-free section technically has spoilers. You begin OMORI in white space, a small room with nothing but your laptop, sketchbook, tissue box, cat, and a single light bulb. There's also a door that will lead you to a new world called Headspace. And that's about as far as I'm going to be saying in terms of the names of things. I'll be showing areas of Headspace, but all of it will be from the first 20 minutes of the game. Now that I've revealed the basics of white space, I want to talk about the game as a whole. Almost everything in this game is expertly crafted. I'll get back to that later. The art style this game employs is outstanding. Many of the maps are vibrant and colorful with beautiful pixel art. These maps contrast perfectly with some of the cutscenes and other maps that I can't actually show without spoiling anything. Speaking of cutscenes, OMORI uses hand-drawn animation during many of the important parts of the game, and I'm glad they did. The hand-drawn feel of these animations make the game feel so much more personal. As someone who really appreciates good art design, I know how someone might feel about playing a game with such a hyped-up story and such a crappy pixelated world, but trust me, Omocat and the art team makes good use of the pixels they have. The music in this game is also very solid. Compared to a game like Undertale, I can't say OMORI lives up to the amount of instant bangers that game has. However, Slime Girls and Clover and Sea Life do bring a considerable amount of hot tracks that give the game a very personalized feeling. I can definitely see myself in the near and distant future coming back to this game's OST to listen to some of the standout songs. The title theme is truly a masterpiece. With all that being said, there are a solid amount of flaws in this game that slightly ruin the experience I've been waiting for 7 years. You might find that condescending after I just praise this game for a minute, but I don't find these flaws to be so bad that I would need to warn a new player, though they are things that make me reconsider doing a second playthrough. Now that you've seen sections from the first 20 or so minutes of the game, I hope that I've sparked your interest enough to play it. This game is best experienced with no spoilers at all, and in this next section I will move into spoiler territory. In this section I want to talk about some of the things that disappointed me about the game. I have to say there weren't a lot of things that I didn't like in this game. I think OMOCAD did a great job of creating a game that really packs a punch. However, there is one giant thing I think is really unfortunate. This main thing is the game's combat system. I know you might be saying, I thought he just said there weren't a lot of things he didn't like. The combat system seems like a pretty large thing, and I understand your confusion, just let me explain. For a game that took 7 years and continual delays to finish just right, it honestly makes me kind of sad that this is the state the combat system ended up in. When the game introduced follow-ups, I was really intrigued. I thought it was something that the game would build on for its entirety, and I was excited to see how it would play out. Unfortunately, the game basically never changed the way it worked once. Sure, some of the follow-ups would do something more later on in the game, but overall it stayed fundamentally the same. I found myself doing the same exact thing every fight. On regular enemies, I would use Kel to Aubrey since it did a lot of damage, and that was it. They'd be dead after 1 turn. And on bosses, I would save up all the points to use the release energy, and that was it. I never felt like I was using it in the correct way, and maybe I wasn't, but if I wasn't, I was never told the correct way. Speaking of OMORI's release energy power, I wanted to air one of my biggest problems with the combat. Now, let me say first, I don't play a lot of RPGs. I'm not a huge fan of the way RPGs function, and I've only played about 3 in my life. Forgive me if this is just a constant RPG problem, but I was disappointed at just how spongy some of the bosses were. Almost all the bosses in this game feel like they have too much health. I love a good boss fight personally, but I don't want one that takes 15 minutes to do. It doesn't help that the combat system is excruciatingly slow. My attacks felt extremely weak on bosses, especially compared to the normal enemies, and that's a feeling I hated. I would rather fight a big boss that does a ton of damage to me but I can kill in 5 minutes, than one that does a little damage but takes me 20 minutes to defeat. Looking at you, Mr. Jossum. Again, forgive me if this is just a common RPG problem, but I just wish it was somehow different. The one thing about the system that hurt me the most is just how much RNG each and every boss and mini-boss had. I cannot think of a single time in the game where I knew what the enemy was going to do. This is a feeling that I despise with all of my being. I want to know what the enemy is doing and how I can counter it in the best way possible. Ironically, the skill I found myself using the most was actually called counter. This wasn't a good thing though, because I felt like I had no other choice. Every boss and mini-boss fight would be the same. I would use a really good skill on OMORI, then counter with Aubrey, then heal Aubrey with Kel, and then heal Juice or Health or something with Hero. I would do that until I built up enough for the release power, and that would be it. This was just such a tedious process, and one that I genuinely hated. Despite all of this, I was able to kill every boss first try except for one, and that was goddamn Sweetheart. This fight makes me cringe just rewatching it, and oh my god do I not want to redo it. Sweetheart's attacks seem so random and crazy that I can't in my right mind think that the playtesters didn't beg OMOCAT to rework the fight. Although it only took me 2 tries to beat her, that first try made me genuinely angry. Sweetheart's ability to swing the mace and hit everyone as an attack that does so much damage is actually stupid. I would find myself charging up the release energy just to have one of my friends who is slightly low on health get toasted, forcing me to waste another turn on reviving them and trying to heal everyone to full again. I feel sorry for anyone who has to do this fight without an absolutely packed full inventory of life gems and health items, because I for one know I would never have beaten her if I was not stocked up. Another thing that annoyed me about this game is the one main thing that's stopping me from coming back and doing a second playthrough, this thing being just how slow the text progression is in this game. OMORI in no way respects your time. It will progress the text and cutscenes however it wants. For the first playthrough, this progression is pretty much fine, since everything is new and the text and scenes have a heavy hit at their pace. However, going back and doing things again, it pains me just how slow the text reads, even when you're holding down keys to make it auto-read. Like I said, I was pretty much fine for the first playthrough, but even when I went back in the game just to get different endings, I would find myself holding down the X button on my controller and looking at my phone for minutes at a time since there's no way to skip the text or scroll faster. I find it hard to believe that no playtester asked OMOCAT to add in a fast scroll or a text skipping option. I just think that OMOCAT never put one in to give the game a certain experience. This experience is great for the first 10 hours, but really starts hurting later on. Now that I've aired my grievances about the combat system and the text progression, you might be thinking, wow, why did he give it such a glowing review at the beginning? It sounds like he really didn't like this game, and I can understand where you're getting that from. Although I have these problems with the game, I still think OMOCAT did a multitude of things extremely well. Going back to the combat system, I thought that the emotions aspect of combat was really interesting and fun to work with. It doesn't really show itself that much for the first 10 hours or so of the game, but by the last 5 hours, if you don't know how to use those emotions, you'll be dead in the water. I thought being able to combo a character changing emotions so they can use a certain skill was a lot of fun, and I think that's probably the best thing about the combat system. I also don't want to scare anyone off with the text progression in this game. Like I said, for the first playthrough, the progression is pretty much fine. Besides a few random NPCs who had long unskippable texts, I never found myself wanting to skip things. I think OMOCAT paced the dialogue well, and the pace works especially well during the scary and dramatic scenes. Though, like I said, I do wish there was a way to make them faster on subsequent playthroughs. I'm now going to move on to the final section of this video. If you've ignored my pleas to stop watching if you haven't played the game, I beg you to listen. Although I just shat on some of the key systems of this game, I'd still argue that this game is very well made. If you have any chance at all of playing this game, any bit of interest, please play it or at least watch a playthrough. It's long, but it's worth it. I'm going to be spoiling most of the game's plot points in this next section. I really enjoyed OMORI's story. I think there were some shortcomings in certain areas of the plot, but overall I think it was well crafted. OMORI's sense of mystery and drama kept me enthralled for almost the whole game, and I persevered through some of the sections in Headspace just so I could get another taste of the real world. The problem I have with the story, however, is that I don't think that the game goes far enough into the characters and their backstories or morals. Numerous times throughout the game I'd find myself confused about why certain characters were the way they were. I found many of the characters' traits and flaws to be very telling and meaningful, but there was never any explanation as to why these characters had those traits or flaws. For example, I thought Basil being really into plants was perfect for his character, but I was expecting some kind of payoff for his interest, yet I never got one. Maybe it had some big symbolic meaning, but I can't really think of one. Aubrey's gang is also another group of characters that I thought could have used a big overhaul. They show up for the first 2 days, they're mean and annoying, but not in the good story way. I basically skimmed through their text because they never said anything of note. They never have any redeeming qualities for the first days, then on day 4 they suddenly are super nice when Aubrey locks herself inside. It's such a quick 180, and I think OMOCAT wanted me to assume they were always nice and just had the mean facade, but I ended up just laughing and ignoring them. I wish the game went more into who each character was and gave them some traits that I could actually look for. I almost never found myself talking with each gang member voluntarily, because I simply did not care about them from the cutscenes. Overall, the gang is just a bit underwhelming. Besides the gang, I thought that the relationships between the main characters were pretty well done, though I do wish OMOCAT went farther into the interpersonal connections between the friends. I want to switch it up completely now and talk about horror. OMOCAT did a truly amazing job at adding a horror element to this game. I won't lie and say that I rarely get scared of anything, because the truth is that many things scare me. However, I can tell when I was scared from a cheap jump scare that gets me because it's loud and blaring, or from something that was actually scary. I can genuinely say that OMORI has one of the best types of horror, that being atmospheric. Sure, there are a few scenes and scares that you could technically classify as jump scares, the open the door scene being the most memorable.
Look in the mirror again.
But even those don't use loud noises and flashing lights, they just use creepy imagery and an atmosphere that makes the event much more horrifying than it usually would be. I salute OMOCAT for being able to scare me in a meaningful way. I hope more games can give me the same fear of the unknown that OMORI was able to give. Finally, I want to go over some of the problems I had with the way this game ended. Once again, if you still haven't left from spoilers, this is the final warning. I will be spoiling the entire ending. OMORI was the second game I've ever played to make me cry. By cry, I mean more of a tear up if anything. I thought the ending was meaningful, but once again, compared to Undertale, OMORI's ending is quite weak. OMOCAT's use of horror to portray guilt and anxiety and depression is amazing, though I don't think they were able to create a payoff that was as satisfying as I hoped it would be. By the last hour of the game, I was expecting a huge payoff with Basil. I assumed that Sunny and him had some kind of huge connection that they had just been slightly hinting at the whole game. However, all I got was some weird murder mystery that I still don't fully understand. From what I concluded from these Datamined photo descriptions, thanks to Reddit user 1SodaPlease in the Discord for this, is that one night while Basil was staying over at Sunny's house, Mary got mad at Sunny after he threw his violin down the stairs because Sunny didn't think he was good enough. Sunny tries to walk off and Mary stops him to talk. The photo description says she was yelling at Sunny. Sunny pushes her down the stairs. This is confirmed to be an accident from the later descriptions, but you could tell my confusion as to whether or not this was on purpose when I played, since these descriptions aren't actually accessible in-game. OMORI also guilt-trips Sunny during the fight between the two, which further confused me. Mary falls down the stairs and breaks her neck. Sunny brings her to her room in disbelief that this is real so she can lay down and be okay. Basil, wanting to protect Sunny like always, comes up with a plot to hang Mary outside to make it look like a suicide. They hang her up at night, and in the morning her body is found by her parents. The problem I have with this whole ending consists of a few things. First of all, why did Basil always want to protect Sunny? Maybe I missed something, but I can't think of a reason why Basil would want to protect him constantly. Sunny never did anything for Basil, so maybe it's just in his nature, but it still confused me. The second problem I had was with the photo album. At Aubrey's house, Aubrey says that when she was over with Basil, she saw that he had scribbled out all the faces of the friends in the photo album, so Aubrey stole the album to fix it. But before the fight with Basil, he alludes that Sunny scribbled out the faces and he took the blame to protect him once again. So I'm confused when that happened and why Sunny would do that. This also once again leads to the question of why Basil would lie to protect Sunny. I guess it's because Mary was killed and he wanted to help Sunny, but why did he frame Mary's death in the first place? Did something happen that made Basil feel the need to protect him? Maybe I missed it, but I just couldn't think of anything that fit that narrative. While I'm still going all over, I wanted to also go back to Mary's death. We know from Basil's photos that Mary is a perfectionist, but I was confused as to why she would basically attack Sunny. Mary's a wonderful person throughout all the photos and memories in the real world, and is constantly extremely nice to Sunny, so it just seems like a convenient plot device in order to get her killed. The description of this photo says Mary blocked her path, but the photo seems like she basically grabs him, so I don't know. Once again, while still being all over, I felt confused at the overall point of Blackspace. I went into every single door in Blackspace, and I have to commend OMOCAT for making some truly horrifying scenes. The elevator one was the one that really got me. I talked to all of the Basil silhouettes in the respective rooms and concluded that while Whitespace was basically Sunny's happy place, Blackspace was where all his deep down guilt lived. As you talk to all the silhouettes, they tell you more about Basil and Sunny's guilt, but all the messages seemed extremely vague and confusing. I never really understood exactly what Basil was trying to say, besides that he felt extremely guilty for Mary's death, and so I kinda glossed over everything. Basil tells Omori that he waited for him to come back and he never did, but I also haven't fully understood what this meant. Does Basil mean just come talk to him? Does he mean come and help him through the guilt? He says this in real life before the fight, and it still doesn't make sense to me. I just don't understand it. You go through some weird imagery, some stuff happens that I don't even want to dive into, and then you never go to Black Space again. After the game hinted at Welcome to Black Space for the entirety of the Hangman, I figured there would be something more, but there really wasn't, so I feel like OMOCAT really could have done something better with the whole guilt world. Also, the cat scene did not need to be there. The last all-over question I have deals with one of Basil's common lines. At multiple points in the story, too many to find all of them, Basil says, "There's no way out of this, is there?" When I read this line for the second time, I figured that there was going to be some big payoff and he would say something like, "Time to get out of this," or something, but instead he just says it during the fight with Sunny and that's it. I was really hoping for something more meaningful, but nothing happens. I want to know what the point of this message was, if there was no payoff. I understand he's probably referencing the guilt he feels for Mary's death, but it just didn't make sense to me that he would say it so much for nothing to come of it. I was also confused why Basil was being cared for by Polly. It says that she was his caretaker, but did that mean Basil had some kind of disease? Polly said he felt sick during some of the game, and maybe I just missed some detail, but I still have no clue why Basil has a caretaker and not parents. I'm basically nitpicking at this point, so let me move on to something larger. The problem I have with this entire game's plot, though, is something harder to describe, so forgive me if I confuse you. After finishing the game, I pondered one question for a long time. Why Basil? I wanted to know why Basil was the one who went missing, why he was the one we had to find in every single Headspace adventure. The ending to this game has Sunny telling his friends, presumably that he killed Mary and framed her death with Basil, but why were we not trying to find Mary the entire game? Basil was just protecting Sunny the whole 4 years in real life, so why was he the one to get kidnapped by something in Headspace? It just doesn't make much sense to me, and as much as I love Basil, I think orienting the story more around Mary's death may have made the mystery more enticing. When it's revealed through the photos that Sunny killed Mary, I had more of a wait, huh? Moment than a true shock. This game obviously hints at having tons of secrets and special scenes that I should seek out. I already found the bad ending and alternate ending by loading my saves, and those are interesting but not really anything of note. The thing is, I have absolutely no ambition to come back to the game and look for these secrets due to the amount of slow cutscenes and unskippable dialogue. While writing this script, I learned about the Hikikomori path of the game and how it basically changes everything, but I can't even be bothered to try and get that until a way to skip or get through text quickly is found or added. As much as I hate watching playthroughs of games, since I like to experience it for myself and at my own pace, I'd much rather watch a video on the path than sit through 10 hours of text to get the special dialogue. OMORI took 7 years to complete, and it took me 18 hours to beat it, that is, with skipping most of the side missions. And my honest opinion is that I don't think it fully shows that amount of work. That is at least in the first playthrough. I genuinely appreciate that OMOCAT put insane amounts of hidden details, since seeing people find hidden things for the next year will continuously intrigue me. Just reading through the documentation of the Hikikomori path while writing this is really something special. That being said, I do wish OMOCAT put more effort into making sure that the first playthrough, which is the playthrough that 90% of players will stop playing the game at, had an experience that was perfect. The amount of issues that plagued my playthrough made the game feel at the time like it took 2 to 3 years to make, while after researching this game I can tell it needed the 7 years. I want to recap some of the things I said in this review for somewhat of a TLDR. I believe that the combat system was repetitive and tedious in terms of actual fights, but extremely creative in terms of strategy. I feel that the dialogue system is paced very well for the first 10 hours of the game, then falls apart as you get to later sections or try to replay the game. I think that the characters have a pretty average amount of depth to them, but could use more. I also believe that the side characters need a huge improvement to backstory. Finally, I think the ending needed clarification, and overall, I think the game could be oriented slightly differently. As much as I try to give this game a rating out of 10 or 100, I simply can't. Every time I try, I give it a score I think is reasonable, then I remember something I love and raise it, and then I remember something I hate and lower it. At the end of the day, OMORI gives me a feeling of, yeah, it was pretty good. Many gameplay aspects were rough, but the story made up for them. If you've watched this review to the end, yet still haven't played the game, I unfortunately can't really recommend it to you anymore. Like I said, I've basically spoiled the main twists and turns, so I wouldn't recommend going through the annoying fights just to see something I've already explained. Hopefully if a friend of yours expresses interest in the game, you can tell them to not look anything up about the game, and you can show them the first section of this review. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and I hope you have a great day.